Hi, Down Under Tea here, and welcome to the first episode of Frontrunners, where we hope to showcase those among us that stepped into the fray to simply help humanity. Some suffered, some prospered. No matter the cost, they continue to fight for us. We've all faced times in our lives when we've been afraid, when we wished for somebody to take that first step on our behalf just to get the ball rolling. Times when we were shocked into hesitating or pulling back entirely, hoping for somebody braver or in a better position to stand up first, a front runner. In 2020, the world at large was shocked and scared and then terrified by what many deduce was a man-made virus aptly named COVID-19, being that investigation has almost certainly proven it began circulating among the population in late 2019. We were cajoled and guilted into 15 days to flatten the curve, which quickly turned into don't leave your house, ever. Don't visit grandma if you love her, to grandma has to die alone. And no, we are not sorry. Then, if that wasn't enough, which it turns out it wasn't, enter the miracle vaccines. Now, vaccines in themselves are not controversial. They've been around for decades. And there was something different about this rollout from the get-go. Released to the public under emergency use authorization at the end of President Trump's administration, the rollout was aimed at the most vulnerable first, but no mandates. That all changed the day that Joe Biden took his hand off the Bible a little after midday on the 20th of January, 2021. When people started reacting to the shots, it was hushed up and ignored. People worried, but they kept listening to the experts who cared about their health and well-being, or so we thought. Naomi Wolf is a best-selling author and activist who also worried about what she was seeing unfold and decided to stand up and say it. I mean, what could possibly be problematic about that? She was cancelled. Why? What did she do to warrant such treatment? In her new book, Facing the Beast, Courage, Faith and Resistance in a New Dark Age, Naomi takes the time to explain her journey as a frontrunner in unmasking and exposing the sinister plan that our friendly neighborhood globalists intended to put upon our fellow man and woman, and her journey through the fog and to the other side. It's my distinct pleasure now to welcome to the show Dr. Naomi Wolf. Hi, Naomi. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, thank you and apologies for earlier, but let's get started.
Hi, everything's great. I'm very happy to be speaking with you. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. And I'm hoping that everybody that I know on and follows me will take a listen and then rush to their nearest bookshop and buy your book, because I literally read it in 2 days. It was gripping. So I'm just going to show everybody the cover so they know what they're looking for. I have got the e-book, so I didn't actually get the hard copy. When I travel to the States, I will purchase a copy. So guys, Naomi has written this book to explain to everybody what she personally went through during her time trying to expose the Pfizer vaccine and their cohorts, all the Moderna, etc., etc. I think she's explained it really, really well in her book. So that's why I encourage you all to go out and buy it ASAP. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, please trust me, it's a really good read. So, I mean, I have millions of questions, Naomi, but we are obviously short of time. You've had a long day, and I'm going to just let you run with what it is that you want to tell people out there about this journey, how it's affected you, your loved ones, and everybody around you. And what advice would you give to people that want to stand up but are still too afraid to.
Sure. Well, thank you for your kind words about facing the beast. I'm glad people are saying that it's a, unputdownable, which is, writers always love to hear that. It is the story of, what happened to me and what happened to our beautiful countries starting in 2020. And specifically, there's a pivot for me in my life that is also a pivot of the book in June of 2021, when I did what I've done for decades, which action in the past has made me a legacy media figure, which is I was reporting on women's health issues, which literally I've done since I was 26 years old.
Yep.
And to great acclaim in the past. And this time around, I noted on Twitter that women were reporting eyewitness accounts of their own bodies, right? Not my opinion. They were reporting menstrual problems upon receiving the mRNA injection. So obviously that's important, because I'm not a medical doctor, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if women are having menstrual dysregulation in 2021, they'll have fertility problems in 2023, which is exactly what we're seeing. Live births are down by 13 to 20% in the West, and I include Australia and New Zealand. And
yes, ours is quite large.
Right. Oh, I'm so sorry. My team of 3,250 doctors and scientists who united to read through these Pfizer documents have found the reasons, and I explain them in The Bodies of Others. So I'm sorry, in Facing the Beast, which is one reason I think it's actually a life-saving book to give to people who don't want to be told anything about these dangers. But I was deplatformed right away. But I wasn't just deplatformed, I was also globally smeared in a fascinating way. Like my bio changed overnight everywhere to conspiracy theorist, from like Rhodes Scholar. And I found out later, because of 2 lawsuits by attorneys general, that it was the White House directing that, took my accurate little tweet, and the White House, for whom I had voted, shared it with CDC, and they used it to pressure Twitter and Facebook in restricting my First Amendment rights to free speech, and also like turning my life upside down, because I didn't just get deplatformed, I got unpersoned on the left.
Yeah.
It turned out to be a blessing in disguise, though, because the rest of the story is that I began to have conversations with people outside the bubble of the legacy media left, and these led me to really re-examine a lot of my preconceptions and beliefs, and culminating in a letter of apology. Dear conservatives, I apologize, in which I kind of identify all the things I believed that just weren't true.
That was a great chapter. That was a great chapter. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not saying that the answer is one side or another. I don't think these labels matter right now. But what we're seeing in the world is there are those of us who are questioning, and those of us who are in a state of delusion and unquestioning. And there are those of us who are aligning with authoritarians, and those of us who are fighting for freedom. And those are the divisions that matter most right now, maybe ultimately. And so the book also goes into detail about these incredible discoveries of the team going through the Pfizer documents, but also it ventures into my conclusion that we are not in a time of normal human history. And it's really going out on a limb to say, because I'm kind of educated to not talk about these things, but I had to conclude that we're in a time of like metaphysical history in which normal human politics and processes are not the whole story, and that there seems to be a global combat between good and evil, which is like massive, bigger than people.
Yes.
So that led me to believe in God more literally than I had.
Yes.
And I share that journey. It's an ongoing one, but that's essentially the arc of Facing the Beast.
That part of it also strikes a nerve with me, Naomi, because I think not just myself, but there are a lot of people that are struggling with faith at the moment. They're wondering, to paraphrase a very famous Jewish person, Lord, why have thou forsaken me? I I think we're all sort of feeling a bit that way at the moment with everything, and it seems to be compounding instead of like petering out, and people are feeling panicked.
Yeah, understandable. And I've also been really interested in the attack during the lockdowns and pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Such a systematic attack on churches and synagogues and mosques
Yes.
and people gathering to worship.
Religion in general, yeah.
Religion in
Yes.
general. And again, that paradoxically made me think, there must be something that really happens when people gather together to pray, or else they wouldn't bother keeping Walmart and strip clubs open and cannabis stores open and
I know.
closing churches and synagogues.
And if that wasn't
But
a big red flag, I don't know what could else be.
exactly. But I also feel like I've actually gone back to, well, I can't go back to a lot of synagogue services because to this day, as an unvaccinated person, I'm not allowed
Wow.
in this, except for like Orthodox synagogues. I'm not allowed in a lot of the synagogues where my loved ones worship. But I went to church a couple of times, and
Mm-hmm.
in the pandemic, I feel like there's been a Baudelarization of even church services. Like there's almost no scripture in
Yep.
church services anymore,
Yep.
and even things like the Kiss of Peace, which is such a beautiful Christian tradition. I went to a
Yes.
church nearby here where people were like waving their hands at one another in 2023, instead of embracing their neighbors. And these are elderly people who might go from one week to the next without any human touch at all.
At all.
So
Yeah.
I think that the war against church and synagogue is not over. But in response to what you brought up, I too felt, especially, and feel sometimes like what my volunteers are finding in the Pfizer documents is like opening the gates of Auschwitz, in 1945.
Mm-hmm.
It's so catastrophic.
Well, I'm currently reading, doing audio book club. One of Steve Bannon's recommendations, Bloodlands, the Timothy Snyder book, and that is very depressing. But it is a necessary part of learning history to try and not repeat it, in my opinion.
Absolutely. But to your point, when I certainly have gone through a dark night of the soul, like, how could this happen to us? What's God doing? How can you let this evil have its way with us? What's the point? Like innocent children dropping dead on soccer fields, and women, 40% rise in maternal mortality because their placentas are falling apart due to these mRNA injections, and babies, nursing at the breast, getting poisoned and sick, and there are charts in the Pfizer document showing babies. They knew the babies were getting
blue
sick.
green colored milk, breast milk. Yeah.
Breast milk. That's right. Ruining women reproductively, women hemorrhaging and bleeding, and just the like industrial scale neurological events, strokes, hemorrhages, blood clots, lung clots, leg clots that we found in the Pfizer documents that we now know the mechanism for. Like, why would God let this happen?
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer, right? But I do.
That's all right. I wasn't expecting you to give us the answer. No pressure.
Right. No, seriously, people have been wrestling with that question of, if God is good, how can evil be allowed for as long as there have been people and monotheism? But I have, in this time been going back to the Hebrew Bible, and I read Hebrew. And so I've been reading the Geneva Bible, which is direct translation in 1560 from the Hebrew. And it's been very surprising and reassuring, because it turns out there have been tons of mistranslations in the 400 years subsequent, and all of them, in my reading now, comparing it to modern translations, reposition God as a character from being in the original super nice, very present, very involved with human beings. Nothing's too small for his attention.
Yep.
Really want, like, truly like a dad, right? But like a nice dad.
Yeah.
As opposed to the later translations, which is like distant and far away and judgmental and irrational and not very likable. And the later translations also foreground the middleman, right? The priest or the intermediary. So that's not in the original. And so as a result of that, I do feel a little comforted day by day, because it led me to conclude that, and I go into this in my chapter of Facing the Beast, have the ancient gods returned, that God, I don't think God's forsaken us, but I think we were making such a hash of it, abandoning the covenant, the basic Judeo-Christian covenant in the West, that he was like, okay, you want to do it yourself. This is what it looks like.
I actually wrote that quote down, something along the lines of, God never promised to take care of us unconditionally in today's current climate. So he's sort of gotten fed up and decided to walk away for a while. We have to somehow find a way to love him again so he can love us again. I'm not sure if that's a good analogy or not, but
well, it's so hard, right? Because we use human metaphors to talk about this meta-human, dude.
Yeah.
But I don't feel, at least based on my reading of the Geneva Bible, I don't feel like God ever washes his hands of us. He's always trying to give us loopholes, right? Like, but at the same time, there are moral laws in the universe he created. And it seems like even he, like, you can't destroy families, destroy babies, destroy children, destroy nature, exploit your fellow human beings forever and not throw everything into the hands of evil, right? Like, that's what happens. And he told us that over and over and over in the Hebrew Bible, over and over and over. And then we still didn't get it. So he sent his, I'm willing to believe, I'm Jewish, right? But I'm willing to believe, okay, we're so clueless, right? We won't listen. We won't get it. I will send my son to explain this to you in language that even you will understand, right? And then we crucified him. On and on it goes.
Yeah,
right?
we're 0 for 2 at the moment.
Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. But I guess where I'm going with that is the character of Yahweh in the Hebrew Bible is always, and I haven't gotten to I don't read Greek. I'll figure that out when I get there, but he's always trying to help us figure out how to not annihilate ourselves.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And this has happened before in history. Humans were almost wiped out in the flood, right? And God's like, okay, fine. Humans were almost wiped out. They were dispersed with the Tower of Babel. They were sent to Babylon. Jews were sent to Babylon, exile, right? We come to the brink, again and again. And I guess what I'm trying to say is there are no guarantees that we'll come back from the brink, right? Because, species have gone extinct, and they've ever killed themselves like we're doing with immoral actions, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. However, I do feel rather, and the book, I don't want to give away the ending of the book, but it concludes that this is a time of a test, right? Because we're now in a situation in which human beings cannot be neutral, because being neutral means aligning with evil now. So I think God has given us the opportunity, by forcing these hellish circumstances, to assess, and for us to assess ourselves, are we going to be a little brave and stand with freedom, stand with our fellow human being, and and life, really, and cherish it.
Somehow find a way to be brave enough to step out. And I actually said this in my podcast yesterday. I can say it, you can say it, but once we all start saying it everywhere across the world in unison, that's a really, really loud voice that people have to understand has a lot of power. But coordinating that voice at once is really hard at the moment, especially when, like you say, there are so many other forces of evil trying to suppress us all the time. So I mean, Yeah, it is a spiritual battle at the moment, as well as a almost physical battle, I think.
Right. No, absolutely. Like one is meaningless without the other, right? And I'm so sorry. I'll say that again. The question of courage is a theme throughout Facing the Beast.
Yep.
Because, in a million, and the idea of delusion, right? Because in a million years, I never would have thought that journalists would be afraid to ask questions, or that doctors would be afraid to heal people and not poison or kill them. I never thought I'd see so much cowardice and choosing self over others, as I've seen, in the last 3 years. And I don't respect it. And especially from the people, that I come from, right? Like I'm in Brooklyn. I come from the liberal urban elites. Like those are my people, right?
Yeah.
And these are people who would never discriminate against people of color or members of the LGBT community. But overnight, all these right-on people embraced a discrimination society based on medical status. And they were happy, perfectly okay with me eating in the street like an animal, being denied entrance to restaurants and civic spaces, and first responders being injected against their will, people who had saved them, right? Police officers and firefighters and, nurses, frontline workers. They were perfectly okay with a Jim Crow level erection of a discrimination society. They didn't say word one in opposition to it. And that's, terrifying and disillusioning. And then the last thing is about, I mentioned the word delusion. These are smart people, educated people who to this day, won't look at primary source documentation if it goes against the narrative. And they'll say things like, don't show that to me, or are you a doctor?
My personal physician refused to accept your documents from the Pfizer war room, from the war room Pfizer documents. She refused to touch them. She refused to accept them.
Wow.
She said I could lose my license for even looking at that.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, look,
are you in Australia?
Sorry. I'm in South Australia. So I was just going to say a high point for me is that we are the lowest vaccinated state in Australia. We were actually insulted by one of the Sky News media that I used to like and admired and watched often. But he one night called us drongos or something like that, for being the least vaccinated state in the country. And, I'm proud to say that I'm a pureblood now. And when I do say I'm a pureblood, generally the response is, well, you were smart. A lot of people are forced.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. I don't love the phrase pure blood just because
I understand. Yeah.
Antecedents, but I try not to say this in public, but I thank God every day that I, didn't take that stuff into my body. And
yes, ditto.
And I'm glad
I thank God. I thank God that you actually gave us that early warning system to guide by, because I pity all of the people, some in my family, that have had to take it by force or because they were guilted into it. My sister was actually cajoled into taking her third booster by that doctor. And I am very proud that I managed to keep my mother away from it. She's 82. I just dosed her up with all of the vitamins that all of your doctors and everyone were recommending, and she got COVID, and she 3 days and she was up and around at 82. So
it's heartbreaking. Dr. McCullough told me about a 1% betadine rinse nasal solution. And I told all my loved ones, including the ones who think we're crazy, and we've all gotten over COVID in 24 hours.
Yes.
But no one will ever say thank you or good job, or I
I
guess
was
I
going
was
to
wrong.
ask you, I was going to ask you that, like, you mentioned a lot in the book that you lost family members, stopped speaking to you, close associates, colleagues, people from all walks of your life just dropped out of it. Have any of those people since come back and maybe not so much apologize, but sort of edged their way back in to sort of say, physically, I
Hmm.
accept that you were right and I was wrong and I want to be friends again, or anything along those lines?
You're asking the right question because it's all symbolic, right? No, like
Mm-hmm.
no one but my mom has actually said you were right. I mean, of those people who drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, and I'd rather be wrong. I mean, of
Mm-hmm.
course.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I know that the so many people are getting sick and dying, and the evidence is emerging to full view because I'm back on some guest lists that shunned
Oh,
me here in New York. But what's so heartbreaking is when people like no one wants to talk about the thing, and I respect people by not talking about the thing, but
yes.
they won't bring it up. But what they do is they'll be introduced to me, people who don't even know me in this world,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll start talking. They'll say things like, "My mom had a stroke,"
Oh,
or "I'm just recovering from COVID," or "I just have shingles." Like and they're fully vaccinated, right? And
yeah.
it's like you could think, well, that's really random. Why are you telling me that? But I know very well what it means.
Yes.
I don't even know if they're conscious. They just blurt it out. Like they'll meet me. This is Naomi Wolf. My mom had a stroke. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard. I wish their mom didn't have a stroke,
Of
you know,
course. Of course. Yeah.
but I think it's their way. Like we're wired to survive, right? Tragically, I think that my team and I and our allied dissident doctors are finally being seen as actually having some life-saving information, as opposed to revolting misinformation spreaders who need to be exiled from society. It's heartbreaking. I mean,
Yeah.
I God bless everyone. I don't, I mean, but part of this is work I have to do, right? Because like there's a chapter in Facing the Beast, which is about forgiveness,
Yeah.
where I'm saying like, I forgive you, person who screamed at me in the lobby of the,
Yes.
my town. Forgive
I do
you
that too on
for
the daily. I forgive you. I forgive you. Silently, of course. Yes. And does that work for you? That was one of my questions when I was listening to the chapter. Does it work on a physical
it,
level for you?
it depends on whom. I mean, look, that what the reason we forgive is not for that person, it's for ourselves,
Yeah.
right? So that we don't just turn into hard-hearted
Die
little
from the inside. Yeah.
exactly. And I feel that, like, I feel that if I didn't practice compassion, if not forgiveness, right, I would, be so full of rage that I would have a horrible life myself, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I also have to stay open-hearted because I have to keep fighting, right? The war is not
Yes.
over. And my husband, who's a soldier, a former soldier of many decades, has kind of been very influential in explaining like wars are, the war of independence in our country lasted for years. Like
Yeah.
wars are not won in a few months, they last for
No.
years. Um,
And I mean, what this one's been ticking over for 3 years now, pretty much, hasn't it?
yeah, and it's going to be like, I don't, I see victory will be like creating new institutions in our lifetime, but I don't expect that these people are going to go away for another decade, right? They're going to keep trying to annihilate us in different ways.
Yeah.
Um, so, but that doesn't mean people don't have to be held civilly and criminally accountable.
I
And so I do
agree.
believe absolute accountability. And honestly, history shows that when there has been a civil war, which is what this is, or an attempted coup, it takes accountability and truth and reconciliation commissions and people going to jail or being, I'm going to say it, being executed. Treason is a capital crime, mass murder. Like some states, execute murderers, right? You may agree or not agree with that as a policy, but that's our justice system
Yeah,
in the
that's
United
right.
States.
Yeah.
And or like,
I mean, in fact, I do. In fact, I do agree with that. And I mean, to just today on our news, it came out over the blower, as we call it here, that all hospitals are back on mask mandates, strict mask mandates for all the
heck?
staff, the visitors, in, out, change your mask, sign in, all of that sort of stuff. I'm sure the sign in's actually going to start again. Apparently they're talking about a new strain, but I, I'm hoping that this time everybody's annoyed enough to not allow for what happened in 2021 and 2022
I
to
hope you're right,
happen
but
again.
It's hard to not comply with a hospital because they will send security after you. I mean,
Yes.
really sorry to hear that. That is a bad sign, that they're drumming that up again in Australia. That's
Yeah, but to this day, I still see people walking around with their masks on, and I think to myself, you're outside in the fresh air. Have you not heard the news yet? Sit outside in the fresh air is the best place to be. So,
heartbreak.
it's going to take a long, long time. And again, we plebes out here just have nothing but um, adoration for people like yourself that are still standing out there and taking the slings and arrows for us. So,
Well, that's
everything.
very kind, but I'm going to gently push back as my last comment, and then
Okay.
I'm going to have to hop off. But I don't. I'd encourage you not to think of yourself and your audience as plebes out here,
Please.
because right, no, and I'm not taking the slings and arrows for anyone except my own family and humanity as a whole. But I guess what I'm really trying to say is it's very dangerous in a time like this for anyone to think they're not important, because exactly the way tyrannies get resisted is people at every walk of life, from every background, no matter if they think their reach is just their family and neighbors or a national platform, doesn't matter. It's the people who don't have a national platform but who do affect their family and neighbors who are most important, right? And imagine what would have happened if everyone from the school board level to the neighbor level to the church level had refused to comply in 2020, or as soon as they realized something was wrong. None of this would have happened, right? And so it's quite dangerous to identify leaders and leave it to the leaders and think. And I've got an essay about this, right? The original title was "I'm not brave, you're just a pussy." And I'm not saying that your
I'll have
audience
to look
at all.
that one up.
It has a different title in the Facing the Beast, because we want to sell Facing the Beast in Walmart. But I was getting so many messages from people who, privileged people, wealthy people with lots of no excuses, right? Saying, well, Naomi, of course I agree with what you're saying, but of course I'm not going to speak out because my boss might get mad at me or whatever. And that's exactly what tyrants count on, is for most people to take that kind of step of, well, they're the ones who are naturally fitted to speaking out, and I'm not the one who's tasked with speaking out. In a tyranny, we're all tasked with speaking out, and we all make such a big difference wherever we think our influence extends to or not.
Which is why I thank you for coming on such a small podcast. I mean, really, I don't have a reach like the great Steve Bannon and all of these people, but I really have been touched and affected by all the work that you've done since this has started with the documents. I've previously interviewed Amy Kelly on my show, and Gianthi as well. She's an Australian-based, one of your volunteers from the posse. She's based in Australia. So I've interviewed both of those guys, and this is just like, the cream on top.
Beautiful. Well, you have a big impact because you're standing up and speaking out. And on that note, I do have to sign off, I'm afraid, and rest my face.
I just want to tell you my favorite one of my favorite chapters that I was absolutely in tears was the chapter about mushroom. and I was literally bawling my eyes out. And there was so many chapters that really gave me an insight into how this has affected you, your husband, your family, and everybody around you. So again, thank you so much, Naomi. And perhaps one day we can do this in real life. I'm heading to the States for the election in November, so maybe we can catch up again then. But until then, again, I thank you so much for joining me tonight and taking the time to talk
Thank
about
you.
your book.
Thank you so much. And people can get Facing the Beast on Amazon. And if you're moved to write an honest review on Amazon, that really, really helps this point.
I certainly
Thank
will
you.
be doing that.
Thank you so much, everyone.
And please
Yes.
tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
dailycloud.io and also on Outspoken on Substack. Gotta sign off, but thank you so much. Thank
Bye,
you.
Naomi. Thank you. And there you have it, guys. The great Naomi Wolf, New York Times best-selling author, and her new book, Facing the Beast. So I have thoroughly enjoyed today's interview, and I really hope that you guys have maybe found that little bit of inspiration, that if Naomi can inspire somebody like me, then perhaps I can inspire somebody like you to keep talking, to keep the faith, to follow the facts, and always to keep finding the fight, guys. So please, thank you. Have a great day. Like, subscribe down the bottom of the screen, and we will see you next time on Meet Me in the Bunker. Have a great day. Mega out.